Hello, and welcome to those of you that are watching or listening to this session. We are providing video and also audio so you can listen at your own convenience. We trust that this session around financial health will be helpful to you in your role as a Vineyard pastor. Well, my name is Danielle Pathak, and I am part of the leadership team. I also serve as the Associate National Director for Pastoral Health and Formation, and then more specifically oversee an incredible team that is working with financial literacy and health for pastors, their spouses, and also their churches. So that's been an incredibly fun project that we've been working on for about 3.5 years now. But today we are talking about a very specific topic, and I'm fully expecting that we're gonna explore and all the different factors, like what this is all about. We're going to be talking about taxes for pastors. Very exciting, actually. But taxes for pastors.
It's
and
fun.
Then
I promise.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm fully hoping that you're going to help us make this fun. Okay, because
It'll be so fun.
Okay, yeah. I'm a little worried. So I want to go ahead and introduce you, Noah, my friend, and you are going to be explaining a little bit more about Clergy Advantage, which you are the head of, right? You are the
Come on.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit more about who you are, what your role is, and what specifically Clergy Advantage is, because they are a really trusted and more kind of long-term partner of the Vineyard. So
yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, first, thanks for having me. This is great. And the intentionality that Vineyard as a denomination is showing to this is so cool. So cool.
We are trying.
But I think for a long time, it was not that way. And it's becoming that way. And the culture is shifting and it's awesome. And we get to sit on the sidelines with our pom-poms and cheer you on and hopefully be a big part of helping in certain aspects. And that's exactly what we're trying to do today. So I think the easiest way to kind of introduce myself and introduce Clergy Advantage is to go through our whys. Like, why do we do this? On the Clergy Advantage side, Clergy Advantage started in the 1970s as a tax firm specifically geared toward helping ministers understand the unique tax benefits that they get. That's why it's called Clergy Advantage, right? Take advantage of your clergy benefits. So ever since then, really has done an exceptional job in serving in the tax space for ministers, now going on about 50 years. But really sort of a pivotal point was in the late 90s, there was a court case involving Pastor Rick Warren. Some of you may remember that. Some of you may not. He had his housing allowance questioned. It wasn't really like he did anything wrong. It was just that housing allowance, ministerial benefits were sort of the Wild West. People were kind of doing whatever they wanted to. And so the IRS went to Pastor Rick Warren and said, hey, how do you do this? What does this look like? Because you're quote unquote America's pastor, right? So we want to sort of use whatever you're doing as guidelines. And so because he's a client of ours, we were the ones that had to defend him in tax court case. And so really they came to us and to our team and said, hey, how have you been doing this for him? And through all of the different congressional hearings and through all of the different back and forth and quid pro quo with the IRS, sort of a foundation was set with ministerial benefits based on what we had been doing since the 70s. Right. So really cool. And it sort of just formalized everything having to do with ministerial benefits. But it also taught us a lot at Clergy Advantage. It taught us that ministers were also really struggling on the financial planning piece as well, right? Specifically with retirement benefits and some of the other unique benefits that ministers have when it comes to their finances outside of taxes. And so founded the Clergy Planning Group off of that, which is the financial planning arm. I'm a co-owner of the Clergy Planning Group, oversee the wealth management division. And so my story is sort of similar-ish as the Lord has brought me through a number of very unique things. I grew up in a ministerial household. My dad was a youth pastor growing up. But in high school, my parents got caught up in a Ponzi scheme, lost everything. Yeah, everything. And so they've been saving diligently, right? They were pastors, so they didn't really make too much money, especially being in youth ministry. But they had said, hey, we're tired of being poor. We're going to go try to get rich quick, lost everything. And obviously dramatic impact from a financial perspective to our family. And so I was like, I'm going to not go into ministry. I'm going to not do anything other than go into finance to make sure that doesn't happen to me and my family. And so that was sort of an interesting season for me as I learned through a very pivotal time about money and sort of my walk with God. And he guided me through a long process of going into finance, serving the high net worth, doing some church planting, and ultimately bringing me here so that I can serve and educate pastors in their financial literacy needs, which is just so cool that we get to do this together today. And so I want to just say it's awesome that we get to do this. And this is not a sales pitch. This is purely education to make sure that pastors feel effectively served. And it's cool that we're on the same page about that.
I love that. I think that part of the value behind all the work that we've been doing, specifically in the last few years, would be to normalize these types of conversations, because we know that there is so much shame, embarrassment. I mean, boy, listening to that brief little thing about your story, I have like 100 other questions about what happened to your family. I mean, people do carry a lot of really complex history around, right? Whatever they've inherited from their own family, and then the ways that they're trying to lead out in their churches. So we're just trying to normalize the conversation. But let me go ahead and I heard a few different things in your story that I want to go ahead and start off and explore a little bit. But what makes, if you had to get really clear, very, very kind of simple, but what makes pastor taxes kind of unique? Because, I mean, why would there be a whole specific organization that would be centering in on a specific profession or vocation? What is it that makes them unique that we as pastors need a bit of help understanding?
Totally. Yeah. So we call them the 4 ministerial tax rules. Right. So first and foremost, a minister is considered duly employed. In the eyes of the IRS, they are considered self-employed. Right. So they have to pay SECA tax and have some really interesting things that happen on their tax returns. But they're also considered employees of the church. So they're eligible for benefits and getting a W-2 and lots of other really cool, interesting things on the tax side. And so they're considered duly employed. Number 2 is that there's no mandatory withholding for pastors. Right. So churches can withhold taxes for their pastoral staff, but they're not required to, which really puts the onus on the pastor to make sure that their taxes are going well. Right. And so that's why we exist, is to ensure, hey, the onus is put on you, not the ministry or the church. So why don't you have a team that backs you up to ensure that you're doing it right? Because if you don't get it right, you go to federal prison, right? Like there's some high stakes on the tax front.
And we do not want that. Yes.
And we don't want that. So that's number 2. Number 3 is the eligibility to opt out of Social Security tax, right? We can talk a little bit more about that in depth. And then number 4, really cool, is housing allowance, and how housing allowance impacts somebody both now through their ministry income and then in the future when they do retire, if they have the right plan. So those are the 4 ministerial tax rules, and the 4 things that would be drastically different than maybe me who's not a pastor.
Okay. So housing allowance, this has been kind of typically one of the most kind of talked about topics within the work that we're doing. And I know that for even myself, being a pastor and being involved in local ministry, this has been a little bit, it's kind of confusing to understand. Totally. Like, what do pastors need to know about housing allowance? And then what type of resources can you point them to so they can be confident that they're using the housing allowance properly?
Totally. Yeah. So I think first it's helpful to define housing allowance, right?
Please.
Like there may be some people are like, hey, what is that?
Yep.
Housing allowance is a directive by the IRS to ensure that pastors and ministry leaders across all denominations and vocations get a deduction for everything that they spend on their primary residence. And when I say everything, I mean everything, right? Like we're talking mortgage or rent, HOA, utilities, taxes, insurance, all the way down to if you buy a new lawnmower, a gazebo, hot tub, anything having to do with your primary residence should be a tax deduction for you. The complexity comes in how you actually claim that on your taxes. Okay. Now,
Okay.
what I'll say is none of this is speculation, right? This is all coming from the IRS guidelines that were formalized through this Rick Warren case. Okay. So this is not just us making something up because it sounds good. This is all IRS guideline. Churches can kind of look at housing allowance differently. I'm going to give the guidelines, and then if people have more questions, they can reach out to me.
Okay. Perfect.
So the guideline is that really housing allowance is 3 unique pillars. Okay. Now I'll preface this by saying you can only claim as a deduction the lowest of the 3 pillars. Whatever the lowest one is what you get to claim. The 3 pillars are designated amount. Okay. Designated amount. Typically, every church has some sort of process that they send their pastors through to say, hey, how much housing allowance do you want for the next year? So that's called your designated amount.
Okay.
Number 2 is what is actually spent on your primary residence during that year, right? So it's really important that you keep track of those expenses, because 99 out of 100 times, that's probably going to be the lowest amount and should be the lowest amount. And number 3, it can get a little confusing, but it's called the fair market rental value. 2 things I'll say about fair market rental value. 1, it's not designed to be the deduction. It's designed to be the cap. It's designed to be the maximum you can ever claim in housing allowance in 1 year. There's some tax professionals and other misconception around fair market rental value, like, oh, you calculate it, then you can claim it regardless. That's not how the code's written. The code's written that you can only claim the lowest of those 3, right?
Okay.
So again, designated, spent, fair market rental value, whatever's lowest. So with that said, your mind kind of maybe wondering like, oh, did I designate? Am I keeping track of what's spent? Typically, best practice is to go in and designate your housing allowance at the beginning of the year a little higher than you think you're actually going to spend, right? Because if you, let's say, for instance, that you designate 50 grand, you get to the end of the year, you only spent 30 grand. That's great. It ensured that you got the full deduction. And then there's a box on your taxes where you just say, hey, I had $20,000 of unused housing allowance. That's no problem. Those are funds you would have paid tax on anyway. You ensured that you got your full benefit. Some people and churches get a little skittish and say, oh, you can't designate too much of your paycheck. That's actually wrong. And it's not best practice, because what happens if you designate 30 grand, but you spend 50, you don't get to claim the 50. You only get to claim the 30, right? It's not like the IRS is going to come after you because you designated too high of an amount. That's not in the realm of reality.
Yes.
Right? What is reality is that is the intention of the IRS to give you a deduction for everything that you spend on your primary residence. And we want to ensure that that happens. And so the goal would be to designate a little bit higher in case you do have unexpected expenses, so that you can fill that gap to ensure you're getting full benefits. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And that is actually very, very helpful. I wish that somebody would have properly explained that to us at the very beginning, because the part that, if I had to talk about our personal mistakes, would be home improvement projects. So that would be, and I would wonder, in your experience, if that is something that pastors, and I would love to know some other kind of mistakes that people make with housing allowance, but home improvement projects, if you know ahead of time that you're going to have to replace that water heater, and it's going to be $10,000. If you can claim that on your housing allowance ahead of time, you can't, or actually, it's not even if you can, you probably should. Yeah. You should do that, right? Because you cannot do it after the fact. So if you get to the end of the year and you've had, $50,000 worth of like housing crisis, or like, there's things that are breaking and sewers and whatever, you actually cannot go back, right? Like you're kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good point. So you can change it throughout the year. You can only change it for the remaining paychecks for that year.
Yes.
So like if you come in December 15th and you're like, hey, I want more housing allowance, you may have one paycheck left to claim more housing allowance.
And there's no way that you're going to cover that. Yes.
Totally.
So it's almost helpful to push stuff off or to do stuff at the beginning of the year, right? Or as much as you...
Or just designate high. Like there's no reason not to. Okay. Just designate high, right? There's no issues for designating higher than you think you're going to spend, giving yourself that leeway. And then if it ever does come down to, hey, I designated high and it's going to be higher, there's ways that you can go and change it throughout the year. It does need to be approved by the board. There's lots that goes into that. But it's just so much easier if you just designate higher than you think you're going to spend.
Okay. Any other kind of big glaring mistakes that people make with housing loans?
No, just take advantage and keep track. Like it is the intention of the IRS to give tax deductions for what you spend on your primary residence. If you have questions about like what's claimable, our website, awesome, clergy-support.com, tons of free videos on what's claimable, housing allowance, Social Security, all of what we're going to go through today. If you want something more in depth and you don't really want to talk to one of us, you can just hop on clergy-support.com. There's cool videos to talk through housing allowance, how all this gets claimed.
Okay. Very, very, very helpful. Okay. So next, let's talk about a topic that I hear over and over again, Social Security.
Love it.
I know. Help us, because there is so much debate and talk, and we have a lot of older pastors that have thought a certain way about Social Security compared to maybe younger ones. But there seems to be a lot of information out there specifically about Social Security, and pastors have a limited time, right, to opt out of Social Security. And then why would they want to opt out of Social Security? What's just give us all the wisdom that you would have.
Yeah, come on. Totally. So I'll preface the Social Security conversation by saying this. Opting out of Social Security must be a religious decision, right? On the form, the entire form is filling out a paragraph that says, this is my religious decision for opting out of Social Security. So what we'll go through are the pros and cons of the decision, but the decision must be purely religious. And so that's why we can't really ever give somebody advice on what they should do about Social Security, nor should anybody. Right? If you are an executive pastor or a senior pastor and you have somebody younger underneath you that is like, hey, what do I do about Social Security? You technically should not give them any advice at all other than go pray about it. Right? Like that's the entire preface for the Social Security conversation, because it must be an individual's unique opting out based on their religious objections. Okay, so I'll preface it by saying that. That's very important. Now we'll go through like what happens if you opt in, what happens if you opt out.
Please.
You made a very good point there. You have to make a decision within 2 years of you becoming licensed, commissioned, or ordained. Okay. 2 years. That's initially, so your first 2 years. And that's really if you receive about $400 of pay as being licensed, commissioned, or ordained. That's when the clock starts, and it's 2 tax years. So the decision must be made within those 2 tax years. If you make no decision at all, you're automatically in forever. And if you're in, here's what that means. Your Social Security tax is going to be 15.3%. Now, this is Social Security, Medicare, so everything included is going to be 15.3%. And that's 15.3% of your entire pay. That includes your housing allowance. Okay, that's where we see some pastors get hung up, is they're like, oh man, housing allowance is a full deduction. It's a full ordinary income tax deduction, but it is not a Social Security tax deduction. Okay, so it's really important that you are making plans to pay that, because it's a big tax, right? We're talking 15% of your entire pay. And in most situations, you have to pay that yourself as a pastor, because there's no standard mandatory withholding for pastors. Okay. Now, if you stay in Social Security, you pay in your 15.3%, you're going to get Social Security, you're going to get disability, you're going to get Medicare. All of that's going to be given to you at the described ages of each of those different benefits. If you have questions about those benefits, obviously offline, we can have conversations. Just reach out to us. We're happy to do that. So that's what happens if you stay in. What I say is, if you're in, it is really, really important that you fully understand that you are responsible for those taxes, because that is the number one thing we see people that are in Social Security make on a mistake on is not paying enough or not paying attention enough to their taxes. So just be aware of that. Now, if you decide to religiously opt out of Social Security, what that means is your 15% tax goes down to 0%. But you are no longer paying into the Social Security system. Okay. Now, you are also no longer eligible for disability benefits. Okay. So that's one thing that is sort of like a gray area up in the air. You're no longer eligible for disability benefits if you opt out from the government. Okay. You do not lose any of your previously accrued benefits. So if you've worked a whole long time and you've created a full Social Security nest egg with Medicare, those don't go away, but you're no longer paying into it moving forward. And then really from there, there's a couple more things that you need to figure out from a planning perspective because you're no longer saving into Social Security. What we recommend is that 15% that you saved because you opted out is not a raise, right? That's you telling the government you're going to be a better steward than the government. So you should be a better steward by saving those funds, right? Save those funds. Those are your retirement funds. The reason that tax is in place is to make you save for retirement through Social Security. Is it a bad system? Probably. Could it be better? Probably. But really, at the end of the day, that 15% savings is designed to go back into your pocket and not your pocket now, future use pocket through retirement savings. And so if you've opted out, the goal is to as quickly as possible, get that 15% saved somewhere into retirement.
How confident are you that pastors are saving the 15% if they have?
I know like one pastor. We serve
one. Oh no.
We serve 15,000 pastors, and I think I know one that's like actually doing that. It's hard, right? Like pastoral ministry is by definition not a place you go to make a lot of money. And so 15% is easy to put toward other things that are important, like education and gas and groceries and family trips and paying bills. Like that is all really important. But the amount of pastors that we have seen get to retirement, right? 65, 70, 75, have no money saved, have opted out of Social Security, and now are putting their church in a bind because they're not able to transition effectively because the church is like, oh man, we got to take care of you. You're going to starve to death because you opted out of Social Security and didn't save. And so we got to take care of you. We got to figure out a way to keep you on payroll. Transitions can't happen effectively. We have seen churches shut down because there has been nothing in place for these pastors who've opted out and haven't saved. Right. So it's extraordinarily important that if you've opted out, that you save a big chunk of that 15% somewhere.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I would love to tell you a different story about Vineyard pastors. But unfortunately, we have a lot of very similar situations. Very complicated or complex kind of reasons why and how they're kind of stuck right now with retirement and that sort of thing. So we're definitely interacting with that right now and trying to help and advise the best way we can. But it is a very, very tricky situation. Now, I have more recently heard that there might be a bipartisan bill in Congress that would allow pastors to change that previous decision to opt out. Do you know anything about that? Can you tell us anything about that? And that's not the first time that it's happened.
Correct. Right. So potential. There's always potential on the horizon. Yeah. Okay. For ministers to opt back in. Right. There is not really ever going to be anything to opt out. Right. Like that, they're not going to give you another chance to not pay them taxes. Right. So the bill would be for you to opt back into the Social Security.
Is that a for sure thing? Do you have any idea about timing? Like how, because that feels to me like, okay, so I'd heard maybe like 27, 28, but that would be something for pastors to explore.
Oh, totally. And then ask questions like on your individual situation, because it may make sense. It may not make sense. Right. And so ask questions from professionals that you trust to walk you through that process. Don't just be like, I'm going to opt back in because it sounds great and I don't have enough for retirement. Like not worth it for some people, probably extraordinarily worth it for others. Okay. Have somebody that you trust walk you through that process. Okay.
I recognize that even as we're talking, everybody is bringing their very unique situation, their very individual story to this conversation that they're thinking through. For anybody that's worried that they're not in a good place or that they've done something wrong, or maybe, the taxes aren't quite lining up, maybe they haven't saved enough. I mean, like all the different things. where should pastors be looking for this type of help and advice? Like if they're not going to come to clergy, which we would hope that maybe they come to clergy or something like that to help them with like people that have been professionally trained, just getting online, TurboTax, I mean, like H&R, I mean, like, do those things help with kind of the specialty of being in ministry? Are those adequate? Or do pastors, should we really kind of strongly encourage them to find professionals that are trained in clergy tax advice?
Yeah, I think there's too much benefit on the line to leave it up to something like a TurboTax or an H&R Block, right? Like reach out to somebody who you are confident has an understanding in your ministerial tax benefits. And then if you see your tax return after 1 year and you're like, hey, I can do this, great, go do it yourself. Go use TurboTax, H&R, go do that. But you have to have a foundation, right? Like you have to have somebody that understands this and walks you through this so that you can effectively do it yourself if that's what you want to do, right? Guessing on your taxes is a really bad idea. Yes, it just is a bad idea. And so get resources, ask questions to people who you trust, right? Like we love educating pastors. And most of the time that we do it on the finance side at Clergy Advantage, it's free, right? We're not going to do tax reviews and tax returns for free, but if you have simple questions, like we're here to serve you and help you. We want to do that. I would mention clergysupport.com, tons of really cool free videos, but I just recommend like utilizing somebody at least for 1 year so you know how to do it, right? Like you got to have some sort of foundational base on that. I'll say what's sad is that most financial institutions, whether it's on the tax or the planning side, are not going to be experts in pastors because pastors don't make any money, right? Like, and in the grand scheme of things, that's who pays bills, right? Like is the people that make the money, especially on the finance and tax side. If you get one really big corporate client that has a bunch of money, that's going to drive technology and that's going to drive advice. And so that's why there's not a lot of resources out there for pastors, is because pastors aren't usually in that role. And so I think when it comes to serving in this area, that's why we're so honored to do what we do and really see it as a ministry, because it's so needed, because there's not a lot of this advice out there.
Okay. I really do appreciate that, because you're right. Like there is a speciality to it, and the real acknowledgement that pastors probably aren't making a lot of money, I think is really significant. That's what we've come across. And then to treat them with dignity. I mean, there are pastors that are just pouring. I mean, every pastor, honestly, that I've known is working very, very, very hard to be able to serve people, to share the gospel, that sort of thing. And the worry about, am I going to pay the bills, or the worry about, do I have the adequate kind of money for my taxes, and, or the preparation for my future, I know is a big worry. It's a big concern for pastors. They want to make sure that their families are taken care of. Why don't we just end with, I would love for you to describe, so for pastors that feel comfortable, like where they are with the housing allowance, the Social Security decision, the way that they're saving, can you just describe a little bit more about what clergy does to help with future planning? So in the way that pastors would say, okay, I actually do want to start saving in a very specific way that pastors can start to save, because from what I'm understanding, you can't necessarily do it through certain types of investments. You have to do it in a certain way, right? So clergy will help with that as well. Right?
Totally. Yeah. And that's sort of our specialty on the finance side, is providing the products that give the right tax benefits. The most powerful one is going to be the Clergy Advantage 403B.
Yes.
It's awesome, right? So this plan allows for a minister to put funds in completely tax-free, right? Including a Social Security tax deduction, which it's like the only thing on the planet that does give a Social Security tax deduction. Grow the funds tax deferred. And when you've separated service from the church, whether you're 40, 70, a million, it doesn't matter how old you are, you can take the funds out tax-free as housing allowance, even if you are no longer in ministry. So the funds go in tax-free. They grow tax-free. They come out tax-free as housing allowance. A minister with the right plan is the only vocation on the planet that gets a triple tax deduct retirement plan. Me, I'm not a pastor. I have to choose when I pay my taxes on my retirement. With the Clergy Advantage 403B or a denominational 403B, you don't have to make that choice. You get a triple tax deduction. And with the right planning, that can be extraordinarily helpful for pastors who may not be able to save as much, right, because of the financial situations that they're in. It's important that you save as much as you can on taxes, right? And so having a plan like this to be offered to the church staff is extraordinarily helpful. I'll say our plan, our biggest, hey, you should use us, is the plan's free to the church. So it does not cost the church anything to offer this plan. So if any church is looking for, hey, how about we offer some benefits? Oh, it's too expensive, or, oh, we don't know what to do, reach out to us. We would be honored to help you in that capacity. If you are a pastor and you've been saving somewhere outside of a 403B, a denominational 403B, like a 401k or a simple IRA or whatever, it's really important you get those funds moved into the right plan, because you are wasting your tax benefits by not having it in the right plan. And so where you save for retirement is also very, very different, right? It just is, because you are a pastor, you have unique benefits, and you need people that understand that to take full advantage of it.
So quick follow-up, Noah. We do have a lot of couples that may work together. Maybe they are co-pastoring, or maybe they're on staff together. What would be some wisdom that you would have? What's your wisdom?
Totally. What I will say is that it's really important when it comes to retirement savings. The only thing you take with you to heaven is your housing allowance benefits, right? So if you have a spouse,
is that in the Bible? Is that in the Bible, Noah?
It's somewhere. It's got to be. It has to be. It has to be. Yeah. So you would leave funds to your spouse, but they would all be taxable to your spouse, regardless of if that spouse is ministerial or not. So if you're saving for retirement and you are both ministerial, have ministerial status with the IRS, licensed, commissioned, ordained, and you are saving, let's say you're saving $100 a month, both of you should open an account and you should split it evenly and do $50 each, so that you have the necessary funds and they're growing effectively, so that if one of you passes away, you still have access to housing allowance benefits in retirement.
Okay, so even if there is an inequality with a paycheck, somehow it's like a tax professional would be able to help you try to figure out how to even that out, so that you guys are both adequately, or the couple's adequately prepared at the end of the career. Okay.
Totally.
Okay.
Exactly right. Yep.
Okay. Oh, that's so helpful. Just end with maybe a couple stories. Give us a couple stories of some pastors, maybe more specifically around the future planning. I feel like we need to drop some hope to some pastors that have, that are just kind of righting the ship, and they're starting to think more responsibly and or being a little bit more educated. Give us a couple stories of hope of pastors that are making the right decisions.
Yeah, I'll give you one of not, and then two of hope.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
The one of not is my own personal experience, right? Like my parents, after they lost everything, went through a lot of turmoil, and my mom got super depressed and through lots of issues, became an alcoholic, and my parents got divorced, and it has just been nasty. Like it's been a really, really hard, and it all stemmed from bad financial decisions, right? So if we're sitting there and you're saying, hey, like, I don't know what to do, this seems overwhelming, this seems like I can't even dig into this, it's important. It's important that you are intentional with your finances, right? Like the amount of times that Jesus talks about money and how to be intentional with money, we should probably listen, right? If that's by asking us questions, great. If it's by doing more research on your own, great. Start being intentional. And even if it's $1 that you're intentional with, that snowballs into better and better and better. So I can tell you from personal experience, bad financial decisions ruin families. On the flip side, I will say I have seen pastors who make no more, and I talked to two of them this week, two separate families this week. They made no more than $40,000 throughout their entire ministry career. They were church planters, hopped around. One was a missionary family, and they both this week, thank you, Market, crossed over $1 million in total retirement savings. And they're in their
What?
one's in their early 60s, one family's in their mid 60s. And they can retire with more income based on their retirement assets than they've ever had their whole career.
Oh my goodness.
It's amazing. So that's twofold, right? Like it's intentionality and stewardship. It's also about starting young. Right. So maybe you didn't have the benefits as a pastor of somebody coming alongside you when you were super young in your 20s and saying, you should save. If you're opting out, you should save. Or even if you're not opting out, you should save. If you're in that position where you have influence over the next generation, encourage them to save. Please. It is so important. And if you are younger in your 20s and 30s, I know life seems like a lot financially, but you just got to start. You just got to start somewhere, right? $5 a month, $10 a month. That is how you snowball it into something really, really cool. And that's how you make sure that your family, yourself, and your heirs are set up effectively for life. So we serve, like I was saying, about 15,000 pastors. Most of them really have not seen substantial paychecks. And it's not because they were unworthy of substantial paychecks. It's because they forego substantial paychecks to do what the Lord has called them to do, which is honorable and amazing. And there are people out there that want to help you get intentional. All you got to do is reach out.
Oh, fantastic, Noah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah,
I have a feeling that anybody could call you at any time and you'd be like, yeah, I'm down to talk about this stuff, right?
Come on. Of course. I love it. It's pastor's taxes. I love it. It's so cool.
I love when people get excited about things that I have no idea about. So this is exciting.
It's so cool. Yeah,
okay. So just reach out, get online, Clergy Advantage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Google Clergy Advantage, clergysupport.com. All of the info's on there. Just reach out. Like we would be happy to help you. And I know you and your team are doing amazing, amazing things in that space too.
We're trying.
To help the Vineyard pastors.
We're trying. We're trying to create some new narratives with this. So
come on.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you, Noah. Have a good rest of your day.
I appreciate you.